instruments I've played. Oh, here we go. Some of these instruments I've played myself. I've seen most of them. I've handled many of them. This one I don't know, but I've seen others who play this instrument. And it's the nyckelharpa fiddle from Sweden. And what a nice instrument it is. These little buttons on the side, when you push them, it brings a like a automatic fret that touches the string automatically in the right place. So you don't have to worry about intonation. Wouldn't that be fun? Very nice invention. It's very old, this instrument, at least 500 years, I understand. The bow is, of course, is similar to the bows that we use. And of course, it uses horsehair, as all of the instruments that we're going to be talking about use horsehair. Lisa, hi. So we're just going to go through these and see how it goes. Some of the mechanisms of Zoom I'm not familiar with, and some of the mechanisms of PowerPoint I'm not familiar with, even though I've been using it for decades, ever since it came around. But here, we're just going to go through these slides. I'm going to take you on a world tour, kind of. There are no indigenous, so let me back up a minute. Instruments for ethnomusicologists are classified by the Horn-Bostel, the Sachs-Horn-Bostel system of classification based on what it is on the object that's vibrating. So there's 5 different, Debbie, are you going to do this or am I? The people, I get a band that says admit. I can't hear. Anyway, we'll just deal with it as we go. So there's 5 families of instruments in the Horn-Bostel system. Chordophones is the first, although chordophones are probably the last that was invented and spread around the world, this one particular family. The next one is aerophones, and our symphony orchestra brass and woodwinds both are in the same family, because in both cases, whether it's a reed or a split air column or a double reed, what have you, it's the air column that's vibrating and making the sound, an enclosed air column. So they're all lumped together under the chordophones. Under the aerophones. Membranophones are drums, all the drums of the world, and there's thousands of different drums, and many of the same drum occurs in different languages, so it's a very complicated process to categorize and classify these instruments more than any other. Membranophones, it's a drum head, it's a skin or some kind of membrane that vibrates. And then the 4th classification system are called idiophones. Brandon, I'm sure you're familiar with all this. And idiophones, it's the object itself that vibrates, like a wood block, a cymbal, triangle, xylophone, all of those instruments. And there are more of those than any other of the families. And then in the 1930s, Saxon-Horn-Bostel added a 5th category called electrophones, of course, electric guitar. And probably sometime around the 1970s, you'd have to add digitophones, although that's my invention of a term for instruments that are producing sound waves digitally, rather than simply miking an acoustical sound like what an electric guitar does with pickups. Okay, so these are the chordophones, and they're probably the newest of these families because there are no indigenous chordophones in either Australia or the New World. So this is very much an old world phenomenon. Harps go all the way back to the ancient Egyptians and probably before that. Musical bows, the twanging of a bow, when you shoot an arrow, you hear a sound, and that was probably used to create the earliest of these instruments. But the fiddles are quite new. Probably around 1000 AD, the horsehair fiddle bow was invented by the Mongols, it seems. The Mongols who rode horses across Central Asia and into China, as well as into Europe, and spread this technology. And we'll be talking about the Mongols way at the end of this talk, assuming that we get through it. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. Oops. And where's the next slide? No, I don't do that. I'm going to skip this one. Well, I'll play a little bit of it if you can hear it. So this is a bowed lyre. There are some of these, but they're quite rare. There are very few of this kind of chordophone, a bowed chordophone. These are all bowed. The Vikings played this one. It's very beautiful. I don't know a lot about these Norwegian and Swedish instruments. I know more about the lyres, the liras, the rebecks. There were many different families like this throughout Europe. In many parts of Europe, they're extinct. In some parts of Europe, they're thriving. I was in Greece last fall, and a number of people were playing this kind of instrument. Of course, it comes in many shapes. This is the Cretan lyra, Lyra. And they're amazing virtuosos on this instrument, particularly on the island of Crete. Of course, the most interesting aspect of all of these instruments, the different technologies, the different ways in which they make sound resonate. The liras have sympathetic strings underneath the bridge that are tuned to the particular pitches of the mode that the musicians play. But what's most significant to me, of course, is the music itself that's played on these instruments. And you can buy one of these instruments for $500 at a pawn shop, or even $50, but to play one takes a lifetime. And that's really what a musical instrument is about. A musical instrument becomes musical when it's in the hands of somebody who knows how to play it. I did try to play this instrument, the godolka, which has these pegs up here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, are for tuning the sympathetic strings underneath. It's a very difficult playing technique. Bulgaria. Throughout the Balkans, you have instruments like this. The lira is also played in Croatia. It's the national instrument of Croatia. And we take for granted that the primary bowed instrument of the world is the violin and the violin family. But in other parts of the world, the violin family is marginal. And instruments like these are the center of the musical culture. This is the rabab from Morocco. It comes in a number of different shapes, different decorations, different playing techniques. The instrument that's plucked in this example is called the lotar, L-O-T-A-R, transliterated. And the word tar means string in Persian, in Farsi. And the tar is an instrument in Iran. It's a plucked lute, like the lotar here. And the tar, instruments like the tar, of course, have spread throughout Europe to the west and up into Central Asia. So we have the dotar, 2 strings in Kazakhstan. We have the guitar in Spain and all kinds of different setar, ektar in India. That tar word has followed the diffusion of these instruments. Words like rebab, rebek, are found throughout the Eurasian supercontinent. It probably comes from Arabic, and probably even before that, it comes from Farsi also, the REB root, Indo-European root. More common in Morocco is this instrument, which is a Western viola. Of course, there's an enormous proximity between Morocco and Spain and France. So these instruments are more common, but look how it's played. It's played like a cello. It's held vertically. So remember, when you're going through the travail of learning how to play an instrument or trying to play it as well as you can, look at the ecstasy that a person can find playing a musical instrument. It's really a marvelous video. These instruments are played a lot in weddings, but it's also played a lot by street musicians. And you can find instruments like this on the streets of Morocco in a number of places. Marrakesh, I think, is where this video was taken. This is the masenko, and the masenko is the instrument of the Asmari, who is the Ethiopian storyteller. This is a video that I took in a coffee shop in Lalibela, Ethiopia. And I heard him at night, and he was entertaining the crowd in this little tej shop. Little tej is the fermented honey that they drink. And it was too dark to video, so I came back the next morning and I asked him to sing for me, and he graciously agreed. As with a number of other instruments throughout, all the way into Mongolia, this instrument, of course, has a hank of horsehair on the bow, which is convex. But the string is also made of horsehair. It's made of the hank of horsehair. So you're hearing horsehair scraping against horsehair, and it's a marvelous sound if you can get into that kind of thing. I guess it's an acquired taste. And of course, he's playing this amazingly complicated and dexterous left-hand technique while he's singing. So this is a no small feat. So the titles of these slides are cut off, at least on my screen. This is the Ndingidi from Uganda. Driving around in Uganda with some friends, I saw a little factory on the side of the road, a little cottage industry where they were making these. And I saw how they put these instruments together. They make all the different parts, and then they drill a hole into the sound body and stick the neck in there. And then the last thing they do is hang a hank of lion mane on the instrument, or goat tail, either one. Lions are more traditional, but goat serves the purpose. And it's used to accompany the voice. It's almost like a rhythmic instrument, a percussion instrument in that sense. Take a little bit long. I thought it would be sooner before he started to sing. Let me see if I can fast forward it a bit. Oh well. So that's the Ndingidi. And I brought one back from Uganda, but I don't know what happened to it with all of our moves and whatnot. But it's a great instrument, one string, and you could just, set up these rhythmic patterns with the bow, and that creates kind of a riff that you sing along or even dance while you're playing it. Another instrument called the rebab, another instrument that has one string, another instrument where both strings of the bow and the string on the instrument is made of horse's tail. And we saw one of these in Petra in Jordan last fall. And I sat down and tried to play on it. And, a cello is a cello, right? It's such a simple concept of a box covered with goat skin on the top, with rivets holding the skin on the box. The box is very shallow, but the skin plus the airspace underneath the skin are what give it resonance. And it's a functioning instrument that's made out of not much more than a cigar box. Kind of thing. Do you remember cigar box banjos? So the kamancha this is Iran, but instruments like the kamancha are found in Egypt, Iraq, and even though it looks very simple, the music that is played on this instrument is very complex and very accessible, I think, to a European audience. This is also my video. Oh, maybe we're not going to get it. Okay, let's try this. I'm going to stop the share. Hello, everybody. And I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go. I guess I don't have it here either. So we're going to miss that one since it won't speak to us. So I'm going to go back and share the screen again. So here. Okay. No, it's not gonna work. Anyone have any ideas? There we go. Maybe. There we go. You know, I saw this instrument and people that have played it, and I thought, well, it's like a little cello. I could do that, but it's much harder than it looks. And part of the reason is the technique involves rotating the instrument on its end pin, and the bow stays in the same level. And so the coordination of the fingers of the left hand and the wrist of the left hand rotating the instrument on your knee as you're bowing is quite a trick. You got to start when you're a kid, just like the cello, unless you start later. This is one of the most remarkable instruments in the world called the taus, T-A-U-S. And you'll notice that it's shaped like a peacock. And it's almost extinct now. And the reason why it's almost extinct was because when India was partitioned, the instrument was played primarily by Sikhs who ended up on the wrong side of the partition from where it's complicated. It was played by Muslims who played as paid musicians in the ceremonies of the Sikhs. And when Punjab in India was divided, the Taus players ended up on the wrong side of the partition line. So there are very few left who are still performing as part of the Sikh ceremonies, but it's having a very interesting revival. There are very interesting papers being written about this instrument, the taus. So India has some of the most interesting bowed fiddles, if I can use the generic term, in the world. And there are many, many varieties of instruments like this. And they all, as far as I know, have sympathetic strings, like the gadolka that we saw earlier, the strings that are underneath the fingerboard, underneath the fretboard, if you will, tuned to the different notes of the mode that he's going to be playing. And then each time he plays a note, whether slow or fast, it causes the string underneath to vibrate sympathetically. And this instrument is closely related to the dilruba, which is also played by Sikhs and Muslims. Oops. Yeah, this is it. Similar instrument without the peacock neck, right? I've tried to play this instrument again. Just because it looks like a cello doesn't mean that you can do this. Takes a lifetime, all of these, except maybe the indingity. And even that. Very similar sound. There was a song on the early Beatles album, I think it's on Revolver, that was written by George Harrison called Within and Without You. And the voice of George Harrison is accompanied by this instrument, the dilruba. It was the first Indian instrument that the Beatles used when they became attracted to Indian music. But the most common and most popular bowed instrument in India is the sarangi. And it's much shorter than those other instruments, and the strings are very thick gut strings. All the sympathetic strings, of course, are tuned here. And the technique is very difficult because you play with your cuticle, with the front of your fingernail. You don't press with your fingertips. But that gives you a great deal of agility as you slide up and down the string. Before the Europeans brought harmoniums into India, these little pump organs, the sarangi was the instrument of choice to accompany singing and dancing. It was played in the kothas, which were the brothels where entertainment for the aristocratic men that would visit these institutions was at a very high level. And this instrument was played by the singing masters to accompany the singing and dancing of the women, who were highly cultivated artists. You can hear the microtones, which of course we can do on the cello as well. All these fretted instruments, it's a little trickier. You have to bend the string to produce microtones. But this instrument is magnificent for that purpose. So before we leave India, I thought I'd play a little bit of Nancy Lesh, who's probably the foremost cellist who has explored the possibilities of Indian music on the cello. She's quite renowned in India. She plays concerts all over the subcontinent. She studied for 12 years with Zia Muhyiddin Dagar. She's playing a style of music called Drupad. And I met Nancy when I was studying Drupad in India back in 1983. We were studying with the same teacher. So it was this amazing coincidence, two cello players showing up at the doorstep of the same teacher. I stayed 3 months and she stayed 12 years. She has a highly modified cello. This is a very old form of Indian music called Drupad. Hypnotic, which is what this music is supposed to be. It's a real trance music kind of form of expression. And you can find Nancy Lesh all over the internet and on YouTube. So no excuses. You should all give her a listen. She's a great artist. I have total regard for her. This is the instrument that I studied. No, sorry, not yet. This is the erhu from China. She's marvelous. So, we were. I was in Qingdao in China, which is a former German colony, and that's why Qingdao beer is brewed in this city. And in the city, they had something called the Children's Palace, and it was a Saturday day program in the arts for the children of the city. It was a wonderful thing. They had art classes and dance classes. And I went and sat in on a whole class of little tiny kids playing this instrument. And there was one kid who was like a prodigy, and the teacher brought him up and had him play for me. It's quite something. So it has a hexagonal body and covered with monitor lizard skin. There's a good Trivial Pursuit answer. So if somebody asks, what is the body of an erhu covered with, the answer is monitor lizard. Good. Okay. So this is the instrument that I spent 3 years trying to learn as part of my doctoral program. It's called the hegum, and it looks much like the erhu in China, but it's quite different in other respects. The top of it is made out of paulownia wood, which is a very resonant kind of wood, the plate, I mean, the front of it. But you hold it with the plate facing to the right, as you'll see. And the music that it plays is quite different than what the erhu plays, although now they're playing, cats on the hegum and the erhu. They play the Mendelssohn violin concerto on the erhu now. The level of playing is just extraordinary. They have a wonderful Bode zither also in South Korea that I meant to upload but didn't get to. So that'll be for the next lecture. I guess this is a lecture. So this is the South Korean hegum. And the instruments of the traditional instrumentarium of Korea, when Korea was divided between North and South, and North Korea was adhering to a very strict political agenda, eschewing the old instruments of the pre-liberation eras and the Japanese occupation, reinvented pretty much every instrument in the South Korean instrumentarium, including the hegum. And I'm going to play the example of the North Korean instrument, which is much like a cello, I think. It probably has a similar technique. It has 4 strings instead of 2 strings. And you could see it has a fingerboard, whereas the hegum, the strings are simply suspended and you can pull on them. And that's how you can change pitch and add nuances and ornaments, right? You probably noticed that part of the technique. You'll also see a bass sohagam, northern hagam in the background. here, you can't really see it. Part of the video. Okay, and that brings us to the conclusion of this part of the presentation, which is the Mongolian example. This is where it all began. The Morin Kur, it's called. And the Morin Kur, I remember the first time I played one of these, I was amazed that it felt like a cello, although the strings are made of horsehair again. So it's horsehair against horsehair. And you're shifting up the neck, and there's no body of the cello. There's no fifth position, right? You can just go right up to the top of the instrument. And it was a great luxury to me to be able to do that. So this is the famous horsehair fiddle, horsehead fiddle of the Mongols. And we're going to talk a little bit extra about this instrument in just a minute to finish up our time. But here is an example. This guy is playing in Central Park, evidently. I should mention that I played a trio once for Morin Kur cello and piano at UNCG. Go figure, it's a small world. The vocal music of this part of the world, this is Mongolia, right? Central Asia, is highly nuanced. And he is imitating on the instrument the kinds of nuances that the singers do in their long songs, as they're called, the long songs of the Mongols. So we're going to finish up with one more thing. I think I have to stop the share, which I'll do. Hello, everybody. And go to here. And I'm going to start the share again. So this is a movie called The Legend of the Story of the Weeping Camel. And I'm picking it up 3/4 of the way through. A camel gave birth, or at least attempted to give birth, to an albino. And it was breech. It was coming out breech with its feet in the coming out before the head, right? A breech birth, and it was struggled for days before he was able to pull the infant out. And then the mother was so traumatized that she refused to nurse the baby camel. And so the two little boys have to take their camels off to the little town to bring back a veterinarian. And that's the story. And its relevance will become clear. He's already been to the town and told the veterinarians to come. Bought him some batteries. I mean, this is in the middle of the desert, the middle of the Gobi Desert, where these people live. Very remote. He's been to the town, so now he's been spoiled, right? I'm going to fast forward a little bit. There's the baby that's been neglected. Maybe we'll pick it up here. And the mother. Here they come. Here come the veterinarians. How are they going to heal this poor mother and the poor baby? What's in that little suitcase he's carrying? His tools of his trade? If you ever wondered what cellos are for, really, here's the little guy. Fast forward a little bit. on, Mom. Give the kid a break. Come on now. Well, suffice it to say, it has a happy ending. And the Morin Kur, which is how you say cello in Mongol, saved the day. So, if any of you would like to ask any questions, we have a few minutes, maybe not enough for a lengthy discussion, but I'm happy to stay as long as anyone wants to ask me a question.
Jonathan, I was curious about whether the music that we were hearing, how much of it was improvised and how much of it was traditional or...
Most musical traditions in the world, and Western music is kind of the outlier, the exception. Most of it is not notated, but most of it follows general principles of musical invention, like playing a chess game. I mean, you know the movements of the pieces, but every chess game is improvised, right? You don't read a script. And yet the notes of the mode, the different kinds of melodies that are sort of the basis of the improvisations. In general, music is a mixture of fixed and free. That relationship is universal. Even in Western music, you have a score, but for much of what we do, we improvise dynamics, we improvise ornaments, we improvise pacing, and all the things that aren't written down in a score. So that's the rule. That's music.
That was fantastic. So interesting. Any questions from anyone?
Hello. Brenda?
You're still muted.
How much have you encountered the problem with the hornbostel sax system being accused of being a white supremacist? Because I used to teach the hornbostel sax system because, I mean, it's just so efficient with the cello being 321.322.71, well, when it's bowed, but, the problem is the different cultures, and I guess Kurt Sachs's original text. I don't know how much have you encountered that, because I've listened to this, but I haven't heard an alternative that's a good one for classifying instruments. I like the number system of the Dewey Decimals,
Yes, of course. It's very useful. I have never heard this. But I'm not an expert in this particular aspect of ethnomusicology. In terms of classification, there are people that do this. Maybe Margaret Kotami from Melbourne, I think is where she's from. She's done a great deal of work with sax hornbostel. The world is always evolving, and what was fixed, quote unquote, fixed in 1940, the world has moved on. And so, if there are problems with it, then scholars will have to come in and fine tune it and make it more universal, less Eurocentric. They're certainly, in their day, they were trying to be as universal and accepting and non-judgmental as possible, but times change. And I hate to say it, but fashions change as well.
It's true. I mean, I liked the way it was used, just how the instruments function, and that's how Jeremy Montague taught. And he would bring all of the instruments from home, and he collected a lot of the instruments. So a lot of the instruments I saw that you had, it was interesting. I remember seeing a hanging on his wall, and he would bring them to our seminars for the classes. When we got to the, number 3 for the chordophones, then he would go through those. So that was very interesting. But so thanks for the kind of trip down memory lane.
Oh, sure. Sure, I know. This is your bread and butter.
So many amazing sounds. It's just wonderful.
Well, that's what I am into it for. Is just all, and the different kinds of music, the different modes and forms of resonance, and it's just a great study. Yeah.
How long were you in Korea? I'm so excited. I guess I just didn't know that that's where you were. I knew you had gone abroad to do all your research and stuff, but I didn't know you were in South Korea. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's where I did my work. My dissertation was on, quote, the acquisition of bimusicality, and really about the problems of it, having the muscle memory in the ear of a cellist and then trying to learn this other system. It's like they say that after the age of 15, you can't learn a foreign language without an accent. You'll always have an accent, just because of the way the brain works and the way the ear works and the muscle memory works. And it was very difficult. I made some progress, maybe. I played on the radio.
So you had a cello accent. I think that's great.
I had a cello accent, exactly. Yeah.
Any other questions before we say goodbye, say goodnight? No, I thought this was just marvelous.
Well, thank you, Debbie. It was a pleasure to put it together. I'm glad we got it to work. Yeah. And actually, it worked really well once we found how to do it. Thanks to Brenda. Thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome. I've struggled with this. It's one of those things that Zoom seems to be ever changing. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I know a lot of work went into putting that together. So thank you for sharing that with us.
And here's Jonathan's book for anyone who doesn't have it. Is it backwards in your screen?
No, it's not backwards in the screen. The new edition comes out on June 9th.
This is an amazing book and a huge accomplishment.
Well, we like to think that the new one coming out is even more amazing. It's maybe a third again as long and better organized, and many more case studies and videos and images and maps. So it's really well, anyway, I could toot that horn all night.
Bravo.
It was a lot of work.
Thank you so much to everybody. And I think this was tremendously worthwhile. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much, Jonathan, and everyone who came.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, Debbie, for organizing.
Yes.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks again.
Bye. My pleasure.
Well, I just want to say thank you again, Jonathan.
Sure. It's nice to see you always. We should try to get together before.
Yeah, I hope so.
Before everything.
Yeah, before the rest of life.
Before the rest of life, or during the rest of life.
That would work too.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Well, you have a good night. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.